Hi, everybody. Celia Waterhouse here with OnPoint Mentors. Thank you so much for joining our panel discussion this month. Our topic today is going to be about educating today's youth. Can we do it more effectively? Now, I've invited a few of our OnPoint mentors to discuss this hot topic and invited Paul Campbell as our moderator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have everybody go around the room and introduce yourself and explain why you are interested in talking about and discussing this topic. So why don't we start with you, Lisa?
Thank you for this invitation, Celia. I'm really grateful to be part of this discussion. This one is near and dear to my heart, for sure. My huge part of why I feel like I'm here on the planet is to support youth and their growth and their development. I work from the lens of understanding the mental health behind children, and that so much has a role in education, and we see it play out in education, and education impacts it, and they very much go hand in hand. So I'm really excited to have a conversation and bring a bit of the psychology lens into this conversation.
Great, thank you. Sebastian.
Hi, well, my name is Sebastian Landa. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. Since a very early age, I was very, very interested in understanding human behavior. And I can say that I'm really good at understanding myself and facilitating other people at understanding themselves. Since I was very young, I did not subordinate to people very easily. I was outspoken in various senses, and I didn't follow rules blindly, and that didn't work a lot in school. I got in trouble. I mean, I was a reasonable person, and I would follow rules that were reasonable, but other things that I wouldn't find reasonable, like having to qualify in order to having to qualify for a certain class. Sometimes I saw it as ridiculous. Like, why can't I just show what I really know instead of trying to qualify for a class and just get a particular grade? So since I was a very young, and I'm still very young, but I questioned the whole system, and I questioned what it really is made of and what it really entails. And ever since I was very young, I understood that the power of knowing myself and understanding the power of leading my life with certainty relied mainly on myself. So I was very fortunate to have my mom, and that was very something for, education and younger generations. I think it's something that I feel I carry the responsibility of shedding light on the education system and how people are educating themselves at this point in time. So I think that what I bring to the table is a very unique and young perspective and experience of my firsthand experience of what the education system has been like for me.
Great, thank you. Well, Paul, take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Celia, for asking me to facilitate this conversation that's near and dear to my heart, for sure. I'm the father of 6 children, 5 girls and a boy. So a lot of my time is spent thinking through, I guess, that filter, if you will. I've spent a lot of my time running manufacturing businesses in the United States. And in 2015, I got involved and started my own public school here in the state of Oklahoma, which now has 300 students. And then I'm actively involved in just education and public education in this state. So I went from using it as, well, helping solve a problem for my business, to now this is a huge part of my life, and I'm on school boards and just actively involved. So definitely on my mind quite a bit. And what I thought we could do is take 2 fundamental questions that educators across the planet are rethinking, especially with COVID and really I would call it kind of this awakening around society and a lot of things that are going on. But the 2 questions that I wanted to pose and then get into is educating our children even mean? And what does the obligation of society, what is that? What are we obligated to do? And let's just assume from 0 to 18 that society has an obligation to provide some type of education to other humans. Then the second question, which is to me the one that's most fascinating, is you could argue that the difference between how adults that are in charge of education were raised and the difference between how the students that they're teaching have been raised is the greatest difference in the history of mankind, simply because of technology. And the example we like to use, or I like to use, I should say, is that everybody on this call has a cell phone, I'm assuming. And at your fingertips, you literally have more information at your fingertips than Bill Clinton did in 1994 as the president of the United States. So we have a model, as I'm sure assume you know, especially in the United States, but this is across many industrialized countries. We have a model that was designed in the late 1800s that was produced to produce humans that could meet a factory line. We haven't radically changed that model at all. And not only did it not work in the 90s, in the early 2000s, we have this massive change in how humans are even interacting with each other with social media and all that. So the two questions I want to ask: one, what does it even mean to educate a child? What is that obligation? And I'd like to start with you on that, Lisa. Play with that one a little bit. And then I do want to delve into how do we connect? Like, A, how do we even change education? But how do we even get possibly the adults that are doing it now to even see how they should be educating some of the students, if that makes sense? So Lisa, let's start with you. What do you think society's obligations are?
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually want to start with one of the things that you said about how education was the obligation that it was originally set out to do, which was to train individuals to be factory workers. And I want to just highlight that. I don't know if people really know that and understand that is what our education system was founded on. It wasn't founded on helping develop individuality within students. It was the obligation at the time of the development of the education system was to create many of the sames. And that's not the current reality. And so I think the question that I really want to answer is, what do I perceive as it now who we are, not now as it was created to be, but now what does it actually need to be? And I think we actually have two major obligations. One is enough of an understanding in order to understand how to be in society. So through knowledge, through different skill development, it's the doing part, right? Enough of a skill-based skill development in order to be a part of society. And that can be expressed in so many different ways. But the other obligation that I think we also have, that I think we've totally missed the boat on, is how to be. And that is huge. And it's the inner development of the individual, less about action and more about the development of the self. And when we think about how much time a child spends in their life, in the formative years, under the construct of an educational system, and you look at how much little time is spent on the development of the person themselves, it's really mind-boggling to me. Really mind-boggling. So obligation is to the development, not just skill development, but actual development of the human being, of the child, so that the child, as they go through their own development and growth and evolutionary process, not only do they become more aware of the value that they have in terms of skill and what they can offer to society in that way, but they also have a greater sense of who they are within society and within the whole larger system. And I think we're failing miserably.
Sebastian,
Yeah.
you heard what he had to say, and you know the question. I'd love to hear your thoughts as somebody that is 25 years younger than at least me, I should say.
Yeah, well, let me first of all say that, what Lisa just said, I'm going to build on top of that, because what she just said is just on point, completely on point. The growth and development of an individual really comes down to the magnitude of awareness that they have about themselves, the magnitude of responsibility that they have about themselves, and the magnitude of accountability that they have of themselves. So actually participating essentially in that, and participating in the growth of people becoming responsible for their perceptions, their reactions, their decisions, their actions, and the consequences of their actions, and to have a greater awareness of that will automatically grow the level of competence that a person has to physically just interact with society. And skill sets and specific talents that people have, and determined qualities that are assets or faculties that they have that bring value to society, I think is something that education is also responsible for doing. And that obviously comes in, that manifests, and that you can see that in applied knowledge, right? So learning how to apply certain knowledge, and what it really comes down to is developing a criteria. I think that a lot of the information is out there. The information is completely exposed in your phone, but to actually have the criteria to know how to interpret that information, and to have the criteria to know how to apply that information and apply that knowledge, is something that requires education. And so, as a as a responsibility, or you said it as a society's obligation, I think that what is important is to ultimately build criteria, and to participate in the development of the criteria of an individual, so that they have a complete awareness, responsibility, and accountability of themselves, and to have a specialized criteria in whatever it is that they are ultimately inspired to do. As Lisa said, it help build individuality. I think that every individual comes in life with different set of cards, right? Different set of cards, and it's not about complaining or trying to get the best hand. It's how well you play your hand, right? And so people have different hands, dealt different hands in life, and it's about having the most developed criteria that will serve you in growing and capitalizing off of the hands that you were dealt. And so that is automatically going to develop individuality. And I think that that formation really comes down to those three aspects that I mentioned, being redundant, and it also comes down with how people are ultimately managing their well-being. I think that how they're managing, just like Lisa said, their being, how they're managing themselves, and their well-being in essence really comes down to very simple, essential factors, right? Your nutrition, your hydration, your exercise, your rest, your breathing, and the regulation of your nervous system. And when you can begin to grow off of that, and you can begin to at least have a sense of accountability and responsibility for that, and to take into account those things, and to take into account those things for other people, that's when you begin to ultimately, I think, go back to the essentials that will help a lot of people simplify their minds. I think that because of, it's like Mark Twain said, it's not that we don't know, it's that we know so much that isn't so. And I think that because we're just so exposed to so much information, people have so many options. The kids my age, they have so many options. They don't know where to go. They don't have a direction. Older generations, they had less options. So the road was a lot more simple. And I think that I think that when we begin to develop this criteria, which is, I think, the main obligation of education, people can begin to simplify their minds, and they begin to automatically direct their life with a sense of certainty. I think that that's something that is very important, to participate in the development of a criteria so that people can direct their lives with certainty. I think that that's essentially what education has the obligation to do.
Okay, how do we bridge the gap? I guess pivoting from this criteria is, and I don't want to like overstate the differences between Gen X and millennials and younger, because again, we are all individuals, but how we've grown up is vastly different. And the struggle that I'm having as somebody that's involved in education is not the children at all. It's getting the adults to be able to shift in this. So can we talk maybe a little bit about like how do we approach the adults in all this? And it doesn't seem, at least from what and I'm no expert on this because I've only been involved in education for 5 years, but I see a lot of adults talking about adult issues more than I see anything. So how do we crack that code?
I want to jump in on this one, and I want to talk about it from sort of two lenses. So just for listeners, just so you know where I'm coming from. So I'm the founder and the president of the Synergetic Play Therapy Institute. And fundamentally what we do is we teach and we train parents, therapists, and educators around the world on understanding what's up with kids. So this question about working with the adults is really paramount, because kids are coming in and kids are doing what they do. They are being themselves in the way that they're being themselves. Before I talk about the adult part, there is one fundamental difference that I see that I think is important that for us not to miss, which is that as more technology is setting in, and as we are being exposed with more and more knowledge, there seems to be a simultaneous correlation with spending less and less time connected to our bodies. And that's a big conversation when we're talking about children. Because if we think about, for example, when we were children in school, Paul, there was a lot more physical activity. There was a lot more physical activity. There was a lot more, or even if it wasn't in school, outside of school, there was a lot more. Kids they're moving, they're playing, they're climbing, they're this and they're that. What's happening is that's actually shifting for a lot of children, depending on where you live in the world. And it is having an impact on children's ability to learn in the classroom. So I want to put that in context, because we are asking adults who sometimes don't even know themselves, don't know themselves, sometimes not even inspired about being an educator, not really sure how to meet the demands of education, but then they also have this additional piece of, now I also have to work with the emotional behaviors that I'm seeing in the classroom that may be at a different level than they've been in before because of other factors. So educators are now in this position where they not only have to be educators, but they also have to be, the language I use is external regulators. That's the language I use. But they are in charge in the sense of working with the child's internal development of their emotions, their impulses, their way that their bodies want to move, and it is a component that's important that we talk about, because I see it around the world, and it's one of the number one issues that comes up in a clinical setting, is the child's inability to learn because they're not inspired, because they're with an uninspired teacher, and they're not willing to learn because the environment isn't supporting how their body best needs to be in order to learn. So it's sort of this twofold prong thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to me, there's a whole re-education that needs to happen to educators.
Yeah.
helping them get clear about who they are and what they would love to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Not expecting teachers to teach 20 different subjects, 19 of which they could care too less about, 2 cents about, whatever. Helping teachers become inspired, helping teachers really learn how to connect with children in new ways, and also really helping teachers understand what's up with kids. How do we even, this will be the last piece that I'll say on this, but it is mind-boggling to me because we offer a lot of education in schools, and it is very rare to walk into a school district and to find a school district that's actually been educated on emotional development of a child. Very rare. Very rare to find teachers that really understand how to work with the emotional side of learning, which is such a different education than how do you teach a child math?
Right.
How do you teach a child how to, a science? How do you teach a child physical education? It's a totally different learning. And when we're talking about the obligation being 2 parts, the doing and the being, educators need to be educated in how to do both.
Right.
Absolutely.
Can I just kind of scale in and scale out? I mean, when you first asked the question, what does educating our children actually even mean, right? Now, I don't have children, so I look at it from a different lens of not the actual school and the children in the school, because I didn't have that experience. I'm looking at it more of how does society function with the way we've educated our children to where, they need to play a role in society. But when you ask that question, what does educating our children really mean? You look at, which we've talked about, the child and the individual and the values of that individual. But when we ask parents, what does educating our children even mean? They're going to have a different answer, because they're going to be basing that answer on their own value system, whether it's, oh, I want my kid to be the smartest kid because it'll make me look good, or something, right? And then you've got to ask society, why are we educating these kids, and in what way do we want to educate these kids so that we can become a better society? And then you think of the human race. Ultimately, we are here to perpetuate the human race and the consciousness of the human race. And what do we need to do to educate our youth so that we are successful at that? And and in a way we're doing that. Now we're into technology, like you said. So how do we, and I should have titled it, how can we do it more effectively and efficiently, rather than just effectively? So we need to think about what are the best ways based on where we want to go as a collective human race, I think.
Well, there's an assumption here in our conversation that everyone's on board with the idea that we're all invested in an evolutionary process.
Yeah, I don't think we are. I don't think humans have ever looked at what are we trying to accomplish as humans, really, until maybe recently, or maybe they have. I haven't studied the history of that, but I don't think we definitely don't have a plan, at least from a human perspective. But I wanted to go back to and kind of tap back into the adults in this situation. That's really on my mind. From my perspective, we have the educators and helping them tap into the children, but I want to open the discussion up to parents. And what do we see some of the fundamental things that are lacking with parents in supporting of the education? And I actually want to change that. I don't want to say parents. I want to say primary guardian, because as somebody that's in a poor area in Oklahoma with high poverty, I think maybe less than half of our students have parents. A third of them have grandparents or an aunt or something raising them. So what do you think that's missing fundamentally in the education of our children from a parent's perspective? Who wants to take that one first? Anyone want to jump in there?
Go on.
I mean, I was I mean, that's the question that you just asked Lisa, right? I mean, you were sort of, that's where you were going with Lisa.
Well, yeah, I'm just building on to that. I'm taking it a step further because Lisa went down, and maybe it's the same answer. I don't know. And the reason it's on my mind is I'll be transparent here. We're kicking some funding here in this state where we're putting together an idea around a parent school, a school that will educate parents on how to parent, because from a society's perspective, when we organize around that, all I see is we do an okay job up to Lamaze, I think. And then like, you're on your own, good luck. And so we're actually kicking an idea of like having 18 grades for parents here in the state of Oklahoma, where you pick up after Lamaze and you go through this. I'll start with, I think the thread through this and the thread we need to build in terms of the architecture of this, let's call this a parent school, is how to teach a human and support a human on how to love themselves and learn really what it means to love yourself and self-care. And I truly believe a healing process will come out for those adults that engage in that under the guise of trying to support their children. They're obviously going to get some major healing out of this. So this is a really exciting project that we're working on here. That was private until this webcast, but I just can't pass up the opportunity. I don't know when I'm going to go talk to these three type of people again. So tell me, what if you design a parent school and you wanted to what are the themes that you'd want to see that school built on in terms of what parents need to know the first 18 years of their child's life?
Paul, can I just jump in and say, I love what you just said. One of the things that I tell my students all the time is children are just looking for someone to teach them how to do human.
Yep, that's it.
and that means so much, right? There's so many components of that, but they're just looking for someone to be like, what is up with this whole thing, and how do I navigate it? And parents.
Can I give you a quick example real quick that's just so profound for our school?
Yeah.
Is we had gotten together with the leadership team and talking about one of our things is that we're going to be community leaders. And so all these adults were getting together and coming up with a plan of how they could get the kids involved in the community. And I said, go get involved in the community.
Get involved in the community.
That's how the kids will get involved in the community. They will see you.
Yeah.
And so it's just like this whole complete shift of mindset. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, and to piggyback, I know we went into parents, but I'll just throw in with teachers. Like, so much of when we work with teachers, what we're working with is you have to model it. Quit expecting kids to just do whatever it is. You have to also be part of the transformation. You have to be part of the growth as well, which for so many adults is a new thought. It really is a new thought. And so whether it is the parents or whether it is whether the teachers, I do think it's ultimately the same discussion. But if a parent doesn't know how to do it for themselves, they don't know how to do it for their child. So I think your 18-year, for a lot of parents, it's a relearning. It's a relearning of the different components, whether it is child development on a physical level, whether it is emotional development, whether it is social development, whether it is, how does the mind work, that children are ultimately a reflection of us. And our stuff that we haven't resolved yet, which is also true in a classroom. I really come from the lens of, child development from the biological perspective and helping children learn how to regulate their own internal nervous system until they're old enough to be able to learn how to work with their perceptions to regulate the mind. Because my personal belief is self-mastery requires the ability to regulate the body and the mind. That both are important. And for parents, this whole discussion of how the heck, like, I know when I had my daughter, no one said to me, "Hey, Lisa, are you aware that you're responsible for the development of your child's nervous system?" Like, no one told me that. Are you aware that you're responsible for the development of? No, I thought we were good with food and access to whatever. So I think that there's a whole other level of what does it mean to be a parent that I think a lot of parents aren't even aware that that's part of the job description. Same thing with teachers.
1,000% agree.
So, Paul, are you thinking of this parent school as simultaneous with the child as they grow? And you're assuming one child. Do they have to repeat for the next child and the next child?
No, we haven't gotten that far yet. But
I think it's brilliant.
Well, thanks. I do too. It's something I'm really passionate about, and we've got a lot of money behind it. So I think it has a lot of legs. We're looking at potential 100,000 parents in the state of Oklahoma that we could get to go at least consider going through this. That's 10% of our parents. It could be a game changer for us. So
is it a live school or is it online school?
It'll be a virtual school, but it'll have blended learning as well.
Nice.
So it'll have locations across the state, but it'll be incorporated with the teacher. And there's a lot that needs to unfold on this. And I don't want to derail the conversation here. Sebastian, talk more about your perspective on parents and parenting and what you think parents of the 21st century are missing when they're educating and raising their humans.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to thank the fact that you guys are having the conversation, because I feel humbled, because I feel understood in a certain sense. And I mean, I'll try to put my grain of salt. I noticed that a lot of the problems that are happening with people my age and younger are problems that were unconsciously being solved. They were being addressed unconsciously. They're being addressed with the younger generations. People, they don't have figures. They don't have like this figure that they can aspire to, particularly because there's just so many options. There's just so many options. You don't know which one is the best one. There's just you're placed in an environment as a young individual. You're placed in an environment where everything is so transparent, and you begin to see the human side of everybody, and you begin to notice that this role model is actually just human, and he doesn't have these admirable traits, or this person that you thought was amazing turns out to be just a regular human that you stop putting people on pedestals. And I understand, from what I've learned, I mean, I've learned to not put people on pedestals. It's something that I was raised with, but you begin to understand also like the power of having a role model, and the power of having someone you look up to and say, I want to be like that person. And a lot of that is not happening with people. I mean, it's not happening because parents, they don't have the communication, I think, to step into the paradigm of the child. They don't know how to step into the paradigm that this younger individual is living, simply because they're not seeing what the younger individuals are seeing. I really think that there's a big gap of sensory information that people, because of technology, you see things different. Everything you filter your reality differently, right? And so you filter information differently, and they don't know how to step in. And the reason why they don't know how to step in, I think, is because they don't understand what's really going on with the children. They don't really understand why is this individual having so much difficulty regulating their nervous system? Why is this individual having such difficulty understanding themselves? Why are they asking themselves the questions that they're asking themselves? Why are they thinking about these things that they're thinking about? And this is something that I notice mainly because of parents that come to me and to tell me, hey, I have this child, to give him consults, right? Give him consultations. Like there seems to be something wrong with him. And when I begin to talk to the person, he's just a regular kid, but he's just I think he's so exposed to so much information, and he doesn't know how to filter it, which ultimately comes down to he doesn't know how to regulate his nervous system. He doesn't know how to regulate all the information that is going in, and he's just overwhelmed by information. And it's just such an overwhelm of information that he destabilizes himself emotionally, doesn't know how to come to a decision, doesn't know how to act, and then feels stagnant, and then is just in a complete stagnation. And I think that's some of the reasons why parents, get so frustrated with their children, because they see this stagnant energy. But it's all because these guys, they don't know in what direction to aspire to. And I think that ultimately, yeah.
No, keep going. I was going to say,
You were going to say something.
Well, I think
and so
what keeps going on. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's so important, I think, for parents to be able to get in the heart of the situation. I think it's so important for parents to be able to exemplify what it means to, it's going to sound cliche, but to listen to your heart, and actually have the capacity to listen to that voice in the vision on the inside, and to have the capacity to listen to that inner compass, and to navigate the world listening to your heart. I think that there's so much information out there that they think the answer is outside of themselves, and the answer is inside. And when you can begin to exemplify that the answer is inside, that's when it gets really hard, because a lot of adults, a lot of the decisions that they come to is because of the information that is exposed on the outside. And because they grew up with so little information, the answer was obvious. But here, we're being exposed to so much information, the answer is not obvious. And so for parents and for adults or guardians to exemplify what it means to listen to the voice and the vision on the inside and listen to your heart is going to ultimately lead them to become the figures and the role models and the external regulators that will lead the children into, or lead the younger generations into listening to their own heart.
I think what comes up for me, Sebastian, what you said there is something that strikes me as being involved in a school, is when adults come and visit our school, they get like this customer service voice or something. Like they don't know how to talk to kids, It's like they're like, I know you. Like, we just drove to this school together, dude. Like, you're talking, and then you turn into somebody else when you get around kids. Like, your voice changes. And our schools have been wildly successful on every measure you can imagine. It's been really cool. And I think one of our 10th graders figured out what it is and summarized it perfectly. We had some state board educators, some big wigs in education, come visit our school to try to figure out what's going on there. And she said, they respect us. They respect us. Period. And all the kids were like, yeah, that's it. They respect us. And I think that's missing quite a bit from my perspective in education, is coming from, and it goes back to raising humans, it's coming from that, just for that centeredness of, this is a human we're responsible for that is going to leave the nest. And what do we want who do we want around us at the store? Right? When you guys think about how we deliver education and the services, right now, 95% of the models would have us in 25 humans in a classroom, 10 classrooms per built floor, or whatever. I mean, we just stack them up that way. Can we talk maybe in our last 6 or 7 minutes just about reimagining just how to deliver the service of education and what that might look like going forward?
I'll share a story.
Okay.
So in the Synergetic Play Therapy Institute, one of our programs that we have is something called the Synergetic Approach for Learning, which is the course that we put into schools. And the woman that runs it was a school counselor in a district outside of where I am. And her school was really on the verge of being shut down. And the state said, you've got 1 more years to get your grades up, because, that's so much of funding and whatnot, at least in Colorado, for schools is based on how well academically a school does, which is totally completely backwards. And the school was not doing well academically. It was also in a poor part of town. And basically it was like, if you don't, if the kids don't get educated, whatever that means, right? The school is going to get shut down. So they had 1 year. So Judy, who's the woman that runs this program, went to the principal and said, I'm throwing you a Hail Mary here. We got nothing to lose, but I've got an idea. The teacher said, and the principal said, okay. And she said, I want to stop focusing on academic learning, and I want to spend the entire year helping children connect to themselves.
Wow.
Right? We're just going to flip the whole system on its head. We're going to get kids connected to their bodies. We're going to get kids connected back into themselves emotionally. And of course, the principal said, how are you going to do this? And she said, we're not going to do anything with the kids. We're going to educate the teachers. And so she went and worked with the teachers on helping the teachers develop a new philosophy and a new way of looking at the kids. And then there were other things that, that they did do with the children, but it was really about the educators had to step into a new paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
They won the Award of Excellence in the state of Colorado the final year because of the level of turnaround that school had by not focusing on the test scores, which naturally went up once they focused in on helping the children feel respected, connected to themselves, to each other. Huge. It's like so when you talk about like, how do you do it? I think we've just been doing it totally upside down.
Yeah.
I think that the natural learning in academics it's an extension that happens once there's a sense of connection, because every child wants to learn. Some children just can't. They just can't. Like there's other factors happening in a moment that make it challenging for them to learn. But if we can help children get connected and learn in ways that feels meaningful to them, which starts with a full-on paradigm shift, in my opinion, with the administration, with the helpers in the school, the teachers in the school, because the kids are ready. The kids are showing up.
Kids aren't the problem,
folks. Like, if I got to be here for 8 hours, freaking teach me something. So the kids are ready. It's the educators that aren't ready, in my opinion.
You mentioned test scores. Do we do away with test scores? Because if a child is doing what they value most and what inspires them most, they're going to excel. But we're testing kids, assuming that they're all the same. So do we do away with test scores?
I think that test scores. I think the functionality of test scores can be the following. Test scores aren't specifically for you to qualify. I think that test scores are more as feedback mechanism. It's not, oh, you get an A, you get a B, you get a C. The C is worse than the B is worse than the A. No, it means, oh, you got an A, you got a B, you got a C. Now we got feedback. Now we have feedback of where your attention is going, where your energy is being invested in, and we can begin to have a sense of direction into what is authentically meaningful to you. I think that the value that the education system has is that it's a sandbox. It's a big sandbox where you have 8 hours a day. You're studying 6 different classes that day. You have mathematics, you have biology, you have science. I mean, you have English, and then you have you have literature, poetry, computer class, programming. It's a big sandbox where you get to experiment with something that you like. It's like you have all these games that you can play with. It's like, what game, what area do you like the most? And I think that grades are ultimately going to give you a feedback mechanism, a feedback of where is this kid at, but not as a way to say, you have to compete with your other classmates and you have to get an honors grade, and the people that fail this class are people that are lazy, that they're procrastinators, and you begin to label and shame them, and they begin to judge themselves and think that they're not good enough for life. I think that it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work out that way. I think that what really needs to happen is to respect also the genius that every person has. I mean, this whole this whole labeling, right? You have attention deficit disorder, you have attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It's a label that is implying a shame and a guilt. And when you can begin to say, okay, let's say everyone in the room is a genius, we just haven't found out in what form. That's when you can begin to say, well, now we're going to use test scores as a way to see where your genius is in, not as a way to say how much you're not a genius, right? And I mean, that's my point of view.
I think that's brilliant, that if we started with the premise that everyone's a genius and our job is to help them find it. I love that, and probably will steal that. For us, one of the things that we've done that I'm super proud of is on day one of and we should start this earlier, and we talked about it, but on day one of your sophomore year or your freshman year, we literally ask you who you want to be. Who is it that you want to be? And we actually go through this facilitated exercise about values and all the stuff I know you guys know, in determining your values and not staying attached to it and being open-minded and just learning and going through that and just starting somewhere, building a foundation. And your only thing you have to do is when you graduate, you just have to have a plan that you're going to go do something, and you're going to have to stick to it. But I bet you do to some form. And our first graduating class is this May, so next month. Half of our kids are graduating with associate's degrees. So they're graduating high school with a college degree that we had paid for, that they got paid for. So these are really poor kids. They're going to go to college next year as juniors. And that's not even like, is that even great? I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, that get associate's degrees, because I'm not sure that's even valid anymore. But what is important in all that is when we started this just a few years ago, the college literally sent me an email that said, this is impossible. Kids can't do this. And here's our first class. To me, one of the most criminal things that I see in the education system is the low expectations we have for children. It's criminal in a lot of ways. And what I wanted to leave on, to me, the fundamental belief that I have around educating kiddos and what's at the center of our school, and it's documented and we talk about it a lot, is at the center of every decision we make. Will this educate and empower children? Because that's what I want to see leaving our doors when they're 18 and out of the system, are humans that understand who they are and they're empowered to go live the life that they want to go live. That would be something magical, I think.
Totally. You know, my daughter, who's 15 now, the other day brought up the question to me, why, with all the opportunities, why is college necessary these days, Mom? And I thought that was a really interesting conversation, and it prompted this whole. She's a pretty clear kid about what's meaningful for her, and she's like, Mom, I would just like to graduate early, and so I can go do what I love, and stay focused on that. And I don't know. And when I look at my vision, I don't know if I need college. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I'm seeing another path. And it just brought up this whole conversation of, we're talking about education, and like there's these expectations too about this is how you're supposed to do education, and you're supposed to do it like this in so many years in this way, and then you're supposed to go on to do this, and then you're supposed to go on to this. And I think it's another point of maybe the whole system just needs to be revamped, because the way it was initially designed is just not where we are anymore.
Well, I know defund the police can be so controversial. The concept is brilliant. It's just reimagining how we police or how we respond to emergencies.
Yep.
Public education. I firmly believe in that. It's just reimagine the whole thing from top to bottom.
Yep.
I completely agree.
Could I ask you guys, because, and I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent, and if I am, just, slap me and, well, not really. Do not do that at home. I am noticing a rise in teenage depression, anxiety, and suicide. Do you believe it's based upon that separation of how we're growing with technology, and the education system still remains at this archaic level? And children are expecting certain things that they can't deliver, or they feel they cannot deliver in the way that's not high on their values. So what do you think is causing the teenage anxiety, this teenage stress, and ultimately the teenage suicide numbers to go up as it pertains to our education system, and how can we help that?
I want to
I
grab
have one simple. Yeah. I just have
you
one
might
simple
be saying
answer.
the same thing. Go for it.
People want to feel alive, and if you don't feel alive, then you want to die. I mean, it's as simple as that. And when you have so much technology and you're sitting in a room and you're just looking at a screen, it's like, how am I going to feel alive? Like, go out to nature, just go run, go for a hike, go exercise, go get really tired, go into the ocean, like, find the way to feel alive. And it changes everything, like, I know, because if I go surfing, I have absolutely no, I mean, right now I've actually focused on not, like, I'm gonna expose myself here. Like, I've been focusing lately on not smoking any weed. I'm 24, right? People my age, they all smoke weed. But what I noticed is, if I go surfing, if I go ride my motorcycle and want to get inside the mountain, and I want to be sharp, and I want to feel alive, that's just it. I don't need it, it's like I don't need to stimulate my nervous system that way. And I think that a lot of people are falling into suicide, immediate gratification. It's just they're trying to find a way to regulate their nervous system and activate, their endocrine system. They're trying to just get something out of life and feel alive, and it's just a matter of going out there, breathing the air, running, getting really tired, having genuine connections, like going inside a really cold river. All these things are just really they're things that cause you to enjoy life. And I think that people are not focusing entirely on that. And I think that when it's all about making money, and it's all about turning into the best, and it's all about competing, and it's all about actualizing yourself, and it's all about all this, I don't know, it's just this overstimulation of information rather than just going and feeling alive. I think that that's main reason why.
So I was going to jump in and use Sebastian's words around they're disconnected from their heart, which is similar, Sebastian, to what you said.
Yeah.
And part of why I brought up what I did earlier in the conversation about the body and how children aren't moving the way that they used to move. Sebastian's hitting on that a little bit too. The more that we're in technology, the more that we're in the mind, we are disconnecting more and more from the body. And it is pretty hard to be connected to yourself if you don't find yourself in relationship in your body. And so there are those things that are also happening on an education level too. Even the bare minimum of things that would connect kids in their bodies in schools are being slowly taken away. Things like you're seeing decreases in physical activity, or PE kinds of classes. Recesses are being taken away. Even things like art and music and the arts, where children get to be in their bodies and actually feel rhythm and movement. And I mean, all of that went a long way towards helping people feel their hearts, versus what's happening now, which is all, let's stay in our head and let's learn data points. More data points. So I think there's a couple of things going on, but it's a massive disconnect from the heart. And I see that. I know we're talking about teenagers, but with the population that I see in the feedback, we see that as early as 2 years of age.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just want to add one more thing coming into a neuroscientific, neurochemical perspective. Serotonin and dopamine, which are, the neurotransmitters that regulate you and that also serve you to have a sense of pleasure and motivation. Those things are ultimately that your brain sends them out in a signal, a lot of it when there's a sense of achievement, right? And a lot of the sense of achievement that we get can be we need an external confirmation in order for it to happen. So you need an external confirmation of an achievement in order for you to get that. And so simply, going in and overcoming, I'm using an example here, being able to surf a little wave. Don't forget about it being a huge wave. Just a little wave and getting inside the ocean and being able to get a little wave. It boosts up your dopamine. It boosts up your serotonin. Simply going on a hike and getting really tired and reaching the top of the mountain and going for that hoorah. It's something that will it will secrete dopamine and serotonin, having this sense of achievement. And people, I think that if you're always connected inside your mind, it's just so difficult to have a sensitive achievement because the external factor and the external confirmation is in a screen, rather than it being in your body and you feeling that you're doing physically something that causes you to have that external confirmation.
One of the pieces that they did the year that I talked about, where they went in and kind of flipped the script for the school, was that they turned the hallways into regulation activities for kids. So when you'd walk through a hallway, and this was an elementary school, you had to actually go through tunnels, like you had to crawl through tunnels, or you had to hopscotch right down the hallways, or you had to do things where you were jumping and hitting these walls and that kind of a thing. But they have it throughout the whole school. And that's how you move through the school, is you actually move through the school. And so they would use the transitions as a way to help kids get in their bodies throughout the school days to keep them connected, so then they could then go back into the classroom, and learn. And in the middle of subjects, part of what teachers were trained to do was to pause and guide children through different, physical activities and movements and things like that, many of which the kids designed. What do you guys need right now as a classroom? What is your body telling you? Like so much validation of, teaching kids about how the feedback of their own body to let them know how they're doing so they can optimally learn, and then giving kids permission, even in the middle of a classroom while a teacher is teaching, to do that. It's huge.
It's massive.
It's huge.
I love that. So, Paul, have you done any research into Elon Musk's school, Ad Astra, or any of the things that he's doing?
Yeah, we actually reached out to him and we're talking to him about, shouldn't say that, we're in discussions with people that know him about getting a really close-up look about his school, which he started for his children. I don't know a lot about it other than what I've read, which is really just around what Sebastian was saying, and that every child is unique, and how do we find the genius in that child, and just taking whatever approach you need for that child to do it. And that's really what we're doing at our school as well. We're just not doing it as efficiently and effectively as I think we can, because we still hold on to some old patterns and paradigms and beliefs from the old education system, which is okay. We'll get through it. But we are looking to that. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we're right at an hour. Maybe you wanted to keep going, or we could have another question, or do you guys want to wrap it up?
If you want to take, Oh, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. Thinking of what you had said of what education meant in the formation, I think it also comes down. I was just thinking about it. It's the habitual patterns and certain habits, and what it comes and behavioral skills, and so and psychological, psychological behaviors that consist of psychological fundamentals, just like bravery. I think I was thinking the other day of the power of bravery and being brave, the power of being resilient, the power of being disciplined, the power of uh, being focused, and say, okay, let's just focus on something. Let's just focus on one thing. I mean, I could come up with more, but I think that having a unshakable faith, having an unshakable faith in yourself, and transmitting an unshakable faith in the children, and having an unshakable faith in the people that you talk to, and just when you look into their eyes and you transmit, your whole nervous system transmits an unshakable faith that they're going to be okay, that everything's going to be fine, that they're going to grow, that they're going to flourish, that they're going to become whatever it is that they aspire to become, and you instill that into them. I think that that is something that will make them incredibly competent. And I just wanted to share that.
Wonderful.
Well, Paul, I think I love this panel here, and I think there's a wealth of knowledge, and we could take it in whatever direction we want. I think there might be a series to this discussion on education, and we can, tap on the different niche topics within the topic. If you guys are interested, we can set it up another time to record another hour on a niche topic.
Well, out of selfishness, something I'd like you to consider, Celia, and the rest of you, is as we get a little more meat on this guardian school, parent school, going to come up with a name with it. Maybe we can come back and I could spend 5 minutes telling you what's developed on that, and then you guys can help me think through it and pick at it, if you will.
Absolutely.
I'll offer that up.
Great. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. What another fabulous panel discussion. Thank you, Paul, for moderating. Thank you, Lisa, Sebastian, for joining us today. There's going to be a lot more discussion on this topic as well as others. So hope to see you on those other panel discussions.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.